Now, Jeffrey James, and like I said, he's a retired assistant special agent in charge at the U.S. Secret Service. And Mr. James, thank you so much for being with us today here on NewsNOW from Fox. And my first question, though, where do you think this investigation goes now, or will they be mostly looking into the suspect's background?
Well, that's going to be a big part of it for sure. The other part is going to be just determining what his direction of interest was. And part of that will come from the background, but the other part is and it started already, they're really going to tear apart his social media presence, see what kind of things he was posting. And I've seen some things already, talk to all of his acquaintances and his family and see if they can figure out what the direction of interest was and why he came from all the way from Indiana to the Capitol. Well, I know he had ties to Indiana, but also ties to Virginia. But why he made this trip and why he took this horrific action.
And as you know, Jeffrey James, there's so much context behind all of this today that happened on January 6th, and that's the reason so much of the Capitol structure has just been, really surrounded by these huge fences. That's not normally the case. And so, in your estimation, was the U.S. Capitol Police Force, D.C. Police, more prepared for something like this than they normally would have been?
Well, I know from what I know the Capitol Police and their practices, what happened today would have happened at any other time. The two officers that were hurt, and unfortunately the one that passed away, were part of the outer perimeter, and the bollards are meant to catch anything that got by them. So their normal practices and procedures would have worked at any time, and we saw that it worked today. Of course, terribly unfortunate that anybody lost their lives today, but when you're charged with what the Capitol Police are charged with, securing that inner perimeter of the Capitol and the people who are inside, we found out today that worked. Now, what augmentations happen from here on in, if they're going to continue to use the National Guard to serve as another outer perimeter force multiplier, that's probably going to, in my estimation, that's probably going to happen and move forward because it's going to take time for the Capitol Police to beef up their numbers, even if they get authorization from Congress to do that. By the time they hire people, get them trained, and get them up to speed. So they're going to need some kind of force augmentation, and that'll probably come from the National Guard.
Do you think, just stemming from January 6th, then the U.S. Capitol Police has gone through just such an awful year that leadership of the force, there's an acting chief, that they, were not prepared as well as they should have been for something like this, just because, there has been such disarray in the ranks of the force itself?
Yeah, I don't think that's true. Because, like I said, I think they were successful in their mission of protecting the inner perimeter of their property today. There is going to be a long look at this, and this incident may even be folded into the review that goes into what happened on January 6th. But again, it was a successful mission for them today. But I'll tell you, the Capitol Police have a tough job with the manpower that they have. I don't think people realize how much square acreage the Capitol complex actually takes. And for them to take, as a small agency, to take the hit of losing another officer in such a short time, this is really a punch in the gut for them.
And Mr. James, we saw live pictures of them taking the car away, and that'll definitely be part of the investigation. What will they be looking for in the vehicle itself? We know that the suspect was brandishing a knife. Kind of go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, well, the first thing they did, I'm sure once the initial incident happened, the thing everyone thinks of with cars now is the VBIEDs, the vehicle-borne explosives. So initially, I'm sure they immediately brought dogs out to check the car for explosives. And once they realized it was safe, probably dove into it looking for weapons. And that's what they'll continue to do. And then just keep it's evidence. So it's going to be just like you would bag up a handgun or you would take DNA and secure it as evidence. They're going to secure that entire vehicle in wherever they have it set to be secured as evidence in this murder of this officer.
And kind of going back to the suspect's background, you were mentioning what he was posting on social media, talking to his friends and family. That's all happening right now, is it not?
It is, yeah. And I even saw some were made public already. I guess there was an idea that he was disillusioned with the government. That was the one takeaway I got from some of his posts. But if anybody, and the big part is this, we still need to have that see something, say something attitude. If family and friends of his knew he was heading toward a path where he was so disgruntled with the government that he was going to commit violence, it's really a shame that none of them spoke up and told even their local police about the kind of ideations he was spouting, because that really could have prevented all of this.
And, talking about, lone wolf incidents like this, which is what some law enforcement sources are describing it as to Fox News. And like you were mentioning, the see something, say something attitude, people still need to be vigilant about this. How can, especially U.S. Capitol Police or security around the U.S. Capitol, how can they be on the guard for lone wolf incidents? They're so random and they're so sporadic, but yet so violent.
They are, and it was the same attitude we took at the White House when I was with the Secret Service, that you essentially have to keep your head on a swivel all the time, especially if you're part of the outer perimeter. You have to make sure that you're communicating. Communication is huge. You have to make sure that you call for help when you need it. So when you see someone who's acting strangely, when you see that vehicle that has passed your checkpoint 3 or 4 times, when you see a group that could essentially be doing a surveillance of you to see when you're doing shift changes or when you're changing places with a partner and they might find a gap in your security. Those are all the kind of things that need to be communicated, and the things you need to tell to push up the line to your management to make sure that it's checked on and that it's investigated.
And we haven't gotten any indication. We were being told that there was kind of no relation to any members of Congress. We know it's the Easter holiday, so not many members were in the complex itself. But will they be looking into that just a little bit more to see if some specific members were targeted?
Yeah, and they'll probably look at the intelligence that they've received directed at specific members just to see if this person's name comes up. They get the amount of intelligence that flows into the Capitol Police, because we shared it as a Secret Service. We would pass information back and forth all the time. The amount of information, the amount of threats they get it's just volumes every month. And they'll do a search of this person's name and see if they can cross-reference any specific threats and any specific direction of interest that he may have had toward a member of Congress or a member of the House or Senate.
And, just last question for you, Mr. James, but what was your first kind of inkling and thoughts when you were hearing about this today? What went through your mind right away?
Well, there's a couple things. The first one was you need to figure out really fast what it is. When those officers are first hit, you don't know that if it's a person like we saw today who had violent tendencies, or it could have been someone who had a medical emergency. That was pretty much figured out real fast when he got out of the car with the knife. The thing that goes into my mind is waiting for the secondary attack. This person may have been a diversion, and a second attack was going to come from the opposite side of the complex, from the east side instead of the west side where he was. So all those things went through my mind that this isn't over. And when they finally called off the lockdown of the Capitol, they probably went through all that and made sure that there was no indication of a secondary attack, and this wasn't just a diversion or the tripwire. So that's the biggest thing that goes into my mind is that first attack, while you take it seriously, you always consider it the diversion until you're sure there's no secondary attack coming.
And Mr. James, just last question for you, but after the January 6th attack, there's been so much criticism leveled, especially bipartisan criticism, about getting these fences down, getting these barricades down, because people who work there and live there say this isn't what Washington, D.C. should look like, as the beacon of American democracy in the nation's capital. You spend a lot of time in D.C. Do you kind of foresee now that conversation is moot at this point, that those barriers will be up in place for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, this is tough. You want people to enjoy this. You want school groups to come to the Capitol. You want people from all over America to come to DC and see their Capitol and enjoy everything that's there, all the monuments, all museums. and just the beautiful architecture. But it is tough, and it is a balancing act where you have to figure out, because you can't just throw manpower at everything. The Capitol Police don't have a billion or multi-billion-dollar budget to just hire thousands of officers. So there needs to be a balancing act. But I do believe you're going to see, moving forward, some kind of structural changes in certain areas. I don't believe it'll be all around the Capitol, but I believe there's going to be certain areas that they see as weak points, that structural barriers are going to end up being a permanent fixture.
All right, Jeffrey James there, the retired Assistant Special Agent in charge for the U.S. Secret Service. Thank you so much for being with us here on News Now from Fox.
Thank you for the time.
All right, and we are going to, well, we have a lot of great scenes around Washington, D.C. at the moment, and let's look at them because they are really beautiful now that the sun is setting. It's 7:15 Eastern there in the nation's capital. There's the U.S. Capitol building.